It's that time again. The Naomi Mine disaster claimed the lives of all 34 miners that were in the earth that night on December 1st, 1907. This was the first in a series of 5 mining disasters that would name December 1907 the deadliest month in mining history. I'm your host, Detective Trogdor, and this is The Deep Dive. Today we are discussing the Naomi Mine disaster. The year was 1907. 4 years earlier, the Wright brothers had successfully flown their first powered flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and in 5 years, the Titanic would take the lives of 1,517 people down with her as she sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. Located in Lafayette County, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh, and not far from where the Dar Mine is located, the Naomi Mine is located just east of the Monongahela River. Tapping into the Pittsburgh coal seam, the United Coal Company dug down to the beginning of the vein at 160 feet beneath the surface of the earth. This mine was a slope mine, which differs from shaft mines or drift mines, whereas shaft mines are they dig straight down into the earth, and then drift mines are they dig sideways into a mountain. A slope mine, they just go down at an incline and dig down to where the ore is at, and then they can pull it out that way. Considered one of the safest mines in its section, the mine was in operation from as early as 1870 and utilized an electric motor car. Considered the safest mine in its section, the mine utilized... Considered to be the safest mine in its section because it just had a bunch of upgrades put into it, the mine was in operation from as early as 1870 and utilized electric motor powered coal cars to help haul the precious bituminous ore from the depths. The mine had been examined 4 times in 1907 by an inspector to determine the safety recommendations, and all 4 times, no conditions were existing that warranted drastic measures of remediation. Since this mine specifically only generated a small amounts of combustible gases at any one time, the company had opted to continue using open flame lamps as opposed to electric safety lamps, as the current laws had allowed the companies to operate using any power that they so desired. On Sunday, December 1st, 1907, 34 miners, ages ranging from 21 to 48, entered the mine for the evening shift. All of these employees, except for one, were all immigrant workers. They're just trying to make it, in the land of opportunity. At 7:45 p.m., the earth began to tremble, so noticeably so that the people in the surrounding area took note, and a crowd began to form at the mouth of the mine. Most of the people in the crowd were women and children, but slowly but surely, people from surrounding mines started making their way to the area, because, just like with the Dar Mine, when the earth begins to tremble around a mine, people know exactly what had just happened. Only one unknown man had successfully reached the surface, and shortly after he had made it to the top, he fell unconscious, and shortly after that, died, after he had succumbed to the afterdamp gases that so frequently follow an explosion or a fire in a mine. Much like the Dar Mine rescue efforts, the Naomi Mine rescue efforts were severely impeded by a large roof fall that had occurred just inside the mouth of the cave. Coupling with the roof fall, there were plenty of afterdamp gases that were existing in the area, and still the threat of any more fire damp gases, which are the combustible gases, still present around. Rescue efforts were comprised of local firefighters and miners from surrounding areas. Mine Superintendent Hennersden was the first to enter the mine following the explosion, but only made it about 100 yards down the slope before he was overcome by afterdamp gases and actually needed rescuing out of the cave. Shortly after he received medical care, he was back again to help with the mine rescue efforts. Not much information has been provided in terms of what was put into the efforts of the mine rescue, but at the end of the day, the death toll was set at 34. Though multiple different sources state that it was 35, and I can't find any corroborating evidence other than, I think they just keep cut and pasting from each one that says 35. But the most official thing I found was an article from the New York Times that actually states 34 people were found. So I'm going to err on the side of 34. Of those 34, however, only 28 bodies were recovered. It's time to learn something about fire. Alright, so today we're going to talk about fire and what causes fire. There are 2 principles of thought about fire. We have first, the fire triangle. Up here on the top, we're going to have your fuel. Down here, we're going to have your oxygen. And over here, we're going to have heat. So for any fire to sustain, you need all 3 of these. If one of them does not exist, then the fire goes out. So an example of, let's say, I don't know, a cave fire. If you somehow remove the fuel, i.e. all of those combustible gases, this fire cannot exist. You, however, cannot remove oxygen because people need to breathe. And as for heat, that is mostly a byproduct of the reaction, which keeps itself sustaining at that point. The second principle of fire. This one is called the Fire Tetrahedron. And I mean, I guess technically I could draw a tetrahedron, but how is that really helpful to anyone? Just draw a 3D shape. So, we'll just go with a triangle again, but this time, so up here we got fuel. Over here we got oxygen. And over here we got heat. But most importantly, for the ignition of a fire, we need an uninhibited chemical reaction. And this will come important later when I explained the causes. So, for a fire to ignite and to continue, you need your fuel, which, as we discussed in this case, is going to be all those fire damp gases. So, like primarily methane, which turns out you only need 5 to 15% in your surrounding gases to actually create a combustible, like a large explosion. Oxygen, which naturally exists, and heat, like I said, is mostly a byproduct of all this self-sustaining. However, this uninhibited chemical reaction is usually what your ignition source is. And that's important because if you have all three of these, that's great and all. However, if there's nothing to connect all three sources, then there's never going to be a fire. So an uninhibited chemical reaction, we'll get into that in just a second. So what happened? So many times I've worked with people and they've done the wrong procedure so many times, or they've done something that they perceived was right, but it wasn't the right procedure so many times, and they always tell me, well, nothing bad has ever happened. So I inform them, you could do something 100 times one way, but it only takes 100 first time for you to do it and it go absolutely wrong, and then you will realize that what you were doing was actually wrong. And hopefully when that 100 first time happens, it's not catastrophic. But in this situation, and like the next couple that are going to be following in this deadly month, that 100 first time was absolutely catastrophic and life-ending. Open mining lamps were just your hard hat, and then you'd have, a fire that was right there with a little mirror behind it to reflect light everywhere. Batteries were still not a huge concept yet. They were being, they existed, but in usually large capacities. They were not truly meant to actually be on your head, and those that were pretty expensive. So these companies are trying to make a profit off of all this coal, so if they can cut corners on safety precautions, because the U.S. Bureau of Mining had not been created yet. It's a result of all these accidents. Then no one's going to regulate you and tell you what you can and cannot do. Law at the time let them use any power, like I said earlier, you let them use any power necessary to make sure that they could get all their work done. Electricity at the time, as I mentioned with batteries being so new, was also super sketchy. If you look at just old electronics and you look at the wiring, it's frightening looking. The safety precautions back then and the safety precautions now for us, the amount of shielding we have on different stuff, mostly because we've learned our lessons the hard way. Those lack of shielding is what's going to be causing what's called arc flashes, which is pretty much current, instead of going through from point A to point B the normal way it's supposed to, is arcing over and either causing a ground on something that is not part of the circuit or continuing to a part of the circuit, just jumping. So you have a flash of electricity coming outside of its normal realms, which could possibly, maybe, start a fire. Regardless of whatever the ignition source was for this, whether it was an arc flash or the world's most dangerous hat, that was only one piece of the puzzle. In all mines, there exists methane gas that is going to be down in the earth that just becomes trapped over, millennia of some kind of geological activity. I don't know. Somebody else Go look up why methane exists in the earth on some other nerd video. The combustible gases would normally be ventilated out of the mine using an electric fan or a steam powered fan that would just pump the air, all the gases that are down in the mine outside of the spaces to a safe area, either directly up or up the slope. And then you would also have fans be pumping fresh air back in for your miners to be able to breathe. An investigation after the fact found that even with the severe damage that had occurred by the explosion, all the systems that were put in place were extremely faulty, if functioning at all. Had the fire boss that day gone down prior to that shift to inspect the safety of the mine and check for combustible gases, any kind of, like, not necessarily afterdamp, because that usually follows a fire, but any kind of non-breathable gases, and notice that these fans were in operation, this whole entire disaster could have been avoided. A small note that I should have said earlier, when everything, everyone was dying up there, they only noticed on some of the, some of the bodies that only a couple were actually directly impacted by the explosion, by either the explosion blast hitting them and killing them, or the blast launching them into the walls and killing them. The majority of the people that died from this explosion died mostly because of the afterdamp gases when they were trying to escape and they couldn't breathe anything but these toxic and non-breathable gases. This disaster is pretty much only a footnote in history. It would soon be overshadowed by much larger mining disasters, such as the Yolande, the Monongah, and the Dar Mine disaster, which would, as we all discussed, would compound into the deadliest month in mining history. The only marker for this entire thing is a small stone with a plaque on it that marks the final resting place of 27 of the 34 lost that day, with the 28th being buried at its own individual burial plot. Those fortunate miners that were able to avoid disaster on December 1st, 1907 would find employment elsewhere, try to either go back home or make their way down to the Dar Mine, which unfortunately would take the lives of 239 miners on December 19th, 1907. Well, that's it for this video, guys. I would like to thank you for sticking with me all the way through it. As much as I cover mining disasters, it might seem like this is just going to become a mining disaster channel. I really don't want it to be that way, but I just find it very interesting, the history and lineage that comes with Pennsylvania and the weird little stories that kind of get overshadowed and forgotten about. This is one of those small little ones that is definitely got overshadowed by the Dar Mine that, took, say 34, so 237 times more fatalities would occur. I'd like to thank everyone who is a subscriber on my video. If you're not already, please hit the subscribe button and click that bell to get notifications of whenever my videos are being released. I'd like to also thank everyone who is giving me support outside of the realm of YouTube and is giving me some feedback as it goes. Please, if you could, leave a comment below. Tell me anything interesting you found out about this. Maybe correct me, because I am human and I am wrong pretty often. But I feel like I'm doing actually pretty decent research on this kind of stuff. Much better research than when I was in high school, but who cares about that? I got out of there anyway. So until next time, please share with your friends, talk it up. I'm going to try to keep this going as long as I can, and I'm really enjoying the things that I'm learning, because this gives me fun facts to just randomly bring up at work. Be like, hey, did you know about the 239 miners that died at the Dar Mine? No? Well, how about the 34 that that lost at Naomi? Interesting. Anyway, well, I will see you guys in the next one. And Liquid Death, if you'd like to sponsor me, I will just keep putting this can here until you actually give me official ones, and then I'll do actual effort into promoting you. But for now, you just get this right here. As always, support Ubora coffee. Still love their stuff, and will always love their stuff, and I would really love it if you guys did too. So please leave a link down in the description as well, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.